Welcome to another episode of Earth is Our Home with Dr. Thomas Blaine. Today he's going to be looking at Part 2, Global Climate Change Update for 2023. So stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Earth is Our Home with Dr. Thomas Blaine. We're going to be looking at the Global Climate Change Update for 2023, Part 2. In the first part, Tom talked about the rising levels of CO2 gas emissions and how it's adversely affecting our climate. And today he has some additional information that will help us better understand. But first, Tom, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Patrick, it's a real pleasure for me to share this program with you. This is our third year. I think we've taught the public an enormous amount about planet Earth, the climate engine. We've even talked about the risk of nuclear war, but we focus more on climate than on anything because that has become such an important and long-term topic right now. And it's a complicated topic. There are a lot of dimensions to it. And so that's why we continue with the program, because not only are we doing updates, which are also important, we are revising our discussions of concepts that we've addressed, because I really want the public to have information and knowledge about these concepts. People throw out a lot of key terms when they discuss global climate change, even the term climate change versus warming. They say, which one is it? And it's important for me to address this and put things in perspectives for everybody.
You know, Tom, it's very true what you said. There is a lot of information out there, and to understand all the different terminology and all the different things and put it into context is sometimes difficult.
It's difficult, but hopefully, I think if people watch this program regularly, they'll have it straight in their minds. And, you know, the wonderful thing is they can go back and we put the links to the overall series, and they can watch shows we did 2 years ago and last year and the previous shows that we've done this year. We're off to a good start. That's for sure. I want to go ahead now and just begin talking about some of these concepts. We hear term, if you go down to the third one, everybody knows about the ice ages, when glaciers came and covered much of Ohio and Indiana, much of what is now the northern United States. Those are the ice ages. We're not in an ice age. We're in an interglacial, but we're still in the top one there, ice house Earth. Now, we're going to compare ice house Earth, what we're in now, to hot house Earth. Ice house Earth is the situation where we have interglacials that give us the Earth that we have now, that generally last about 20,000, 25,000 years. And then we go into the ice ages. That's the third one. The hot house is a planet Earth, with temperatures about 18 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than now. Imagine a tropical climate in Montana and the Dakotas. Imagine crocodiles up in northern Canada with the climate of Cuba or Central America. That's the hot house. And then snowball Earth, that has not occurred in our eon, but that's when ice goes all the way down to the equator, snowball Earth. And yes, it's true that these variations in temperature have been natural. A lot of people say, well, hasn't Earth's climate always varied? That's true, but that can be a little misleading, as we will see. I want to show you here's what we have. If you look way out to the right and go down to the bottom, you'll see that says 0 years ago. To the left, that's 100 million years ago, 200 million. This goes all the way back to roughly 600 million years ago. And the reason that we have this map, this is our eon, the Phanerozoic. There's another term I want you to know. The Phanerozoic eon is really right around 540 some million years, depending on exactly how you define it. But the definition for Phanerozoic eon that I prefer is the eon in which there's been life on Earth that's large enough to see with the naked eye. Okay. So whether that was dinosaurs, fish, crabs, birds, human beings, this is our eon. And as you can see, it's kind of what I might call bipolar, reaching temperatures that last quite a long time, 22 degrees Celsius as opposed to the 12 we're in now. So we're in an ice house. You can see we have one 300 million years ago, about 450 million years ago. Temperatures 18 degrees, that's 10 degrees Celsius, 18 degrees Fahrenheit warmer during a hothouse. No human beings have ever lived in the hothouse. The last hothouse ended about 40 million years ago. As you can see, the Earth cooled over that period. And it cooled naturally, primarily due to continental drift, as we will see. So the hothouse, you see those periods up at the top, and you see when we go down into an ice house. We went into a partial one, kind of a middle ground one, about 140 some million years ago. If you look where we had a dip, kind of the temperatures were in between hothouse and ice house conditions. Now, ice ages, when we focus in on that last million years where we're down in an ice house, once we get into an ice house, we have fluctuations of 100,000 years or so, and these are the ice ages. If you look to the right, down at the bottom, 0, and then follow way up, you'll see we're at the top. We're about as warm as you get inside the ice house. We're in interglacial. 25,000 years ago, Earth was 5 degrees or so Celsius. That's about 9 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit colder than it is now. And these fluctuations, of course, are also natural. But these are ice ages down at the bottom, interglacials up at the top. So we've defined the ice house. We're in that. We're not in an ice age. We're in an interglacial. Hothouse, dinosaurs roamed the earth. Tropical climates up in the Dakotas and places like that. And then snowball Earth has not occurred during our eon. We may refer to that later. But I want to show you the way planet Earth lived at the peak of the last ice age, or the bottom, if you will, on those temperatures. When the temperature was about 9 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit colder than it is now, Patrick, look how much of Earth was covered with snow and ice permanently. This was year-round for the better part of 80,000 years. This shows the maximum ice extent that we reached about 25,000 years ago. And as you can see, all of Ohio, or much of Ohio, I should say, was covered all year with snow and ice. And actually, the line where that yearly snow and ice appeared to have stopped was in northern Ohio, but they would have had very heavy ice and snow conditions in the winter. And if you got all the way down to Alabama, or Tennessee, where they are now, you might find some trees. But you got to remember the climate was so cold, it might not have supported those kinds of flora all that well. And you see down deep in South America, there was ice. There's still, of course, a lot of ice covering mountain ranges throughout the earth, including the Andes, but there was much more ice extent down in southern South America than we have now. Now, here's the way we live. So this is 9 or 10 degrees difference. From that, here it is in February. I would be sitting underneath a mountain of ice, 5,000 feet. Down in southern Ohio, where you are, it would be ice and snow, but not permanent, not year round. And you add 10 degrees to that, and we have our planet. This is planet Earth. We still have permanent ice sheets, but they're only in very particular places, like near the pole. You see Greenland there, Antarctica, some high mountain ranges like the Alps and the Rockies have permanent snow cover. So that's the way the Earth looked then. Have a look at this. A lot of people have been asking to talk more about the hothouse. This is Earth roughly at the time Tyrannosaurus Rex came along. Now, they found many of the T-Rex, Triceratops fossils out west, near states or around states like Montana and Wyoming. And as you can see, there was an inland sea there. There was an inland sea. Since the temperatures were so much higher, that land out there was like a tropical climate year round in Montana, the Dakotas, and so forth. You had a lot of rivers filling those shallow seas. And that meant the ground out there was very fertile. A lot of plants flourished. And that meant there were plant-eating dinosaurs. And when you have plant eaters, you're going to have meat eaters because it's a food chain. And at the top of the food chain was T-Rex. And they found a lot of T-Rex fossils out west because they lived along the banks of that inland sea in the river valleys where there was lots of lush vegetation. The Rocky Mountains did not exist. The Sierra Nevada, all those mountain ranges that we know and love out there, they didn't exist back then. They hadn't been created yet by the mountains. But the thing about it is, you notice, first of all, when Earth is really hot like that, sea level's high because there's no ice. So the oceans are a lot bigger and there's a lot less land. And also there are openings, there are ways for warm equatorial water to get up over the North Pole, for example. And what that does is transfer heat very efficiently from the equator to the pole. And because of that, cold air masses can't get going. So you never cool down. Right now, the configuration that we live in, the poles are cut off from warm equatorial waters, and they act as Earth's air conditioners. They're a huge part of the reason we have the kind of Earth we do now, 18 degrees cooler. And the reason the dinosaurs had a hothouse, a lot of water in there that was able to get warmed because it was near the tropics, and then it could flow in various spots toward the poles and keep the planet warm. But in any case, if you look there, you see a sea separating Ohio or much of what is the northern U.S. From Canada, what portions of land are Canada. Even way up there, the conditions were tropical weather conditions. You had animals along the line of crocodiles and dinosaurs, animals like that. It was a tropical type climate pretty much everywhere all over the earth. And that's the hothouse. That's one of the hothouse configurations. Here's another depiction of it. Remember that during these periods, continental drift is still happening. Continental drift is constant. And so at one point, that shallow sea out west broke all the way through what is now Western Texas and New Mexico. And I've been to those mountains, you know, and you can go into those mountains and climb up the side of a mountain. And if you dig around there, you'll find seashells because those mountains are ancient reefs that were under this sea. And so you can see that sea at one point during the Cretaceous cut off North America completely. Look at where Australia and Antarctica were nearly linked. India had a long way to go before it hit Asia to form the Himalayas. And that ocean between Asia and Australia, India, and Africa is called the Tethys Ocean. So I wanted to be able to show you some of the maps of the Earth under the different kinds of conditions. Now, I've mentioned we're in the Phanerozoic eon. That is the eon where animal life has been large enough for us to see with the naked eye. I haven't talked about snowball Earth, where the Earth totally froze all the way down, because that hasn't happened in our eon. Okay. The other three Earth eons, I just want you to know about these. Earth came into existence roughly 4.5 billion years ago. And during the first 500 million years or 500 million years, Earth was molten. It was all the rocks on the surface were basically molten because Earth was constantly being bombarded by debris. That's how Earth came into existence. Gravitational force bringing in more and more material to build the planet. By 4.0 billion, roughly 4 billion years ago, that had stopped. Now, we still get hit by debris every day, but it's very tiny. That process really stopped about 4 billion years ago, and we have the Archean eon that lasted about 1.5 billion years. Then the Proterozoic started about 2.5 billion years ago and ran up to the beginning of our current eon, the Phanerozoic. And the first period in our eon is called the Cambrian. So a lot of times these three eons together are referred to as just Precambrian. And we don't talk much about them here in Earth is Our Home, but they were necessary periods because that's when single cell life began. It became multiple cellular and so forth and developed. You had specialization of cells, but it was at the end of the Proterozoic where this amalgamation of cells in these ancient organisms led to animals and plants that were large enough to see with the naked eye. Okay. I just want to now talk to you. We know we're in between an ice house and a hot house. We know that humans, we've spent our entire existence in the ice house. Our genus, Homo, has existed for roughly 2.5 million years. But the ice house has been around for quite a lot longer than that, between 15 to 20 million years. But, you know, if you're thinking about, well, we might just be leading Earth into another hothouse, we would have about 17 degrees to go. We've raised the temperature to some extent. Here's the thing. As global temperatures rise, and they've risen about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit in the past 150 years or so, feedbacks occur. So that's another term I want us to understand. Positive feedback. So when you get warming caused by CO2 increasing in the atmosphere and trapping more heat, which scientists figured out that it did back in the middle of the 1800s, If you get a positive feedback, it's something that amplifies warming. Negative feedbacks reduce it. So when you make a change to a system, and that change in turn leads to other changes that amplify the change, that's a positive feedback. Positive feedbacks, very important and appear to be dominant. Now, if you do something to raise, in this case, Earth's temperature, but that puts into motion something that causes temperature to fall back, that would be a negative feedback. And if we have lots of negative feedbacks, then CO2 can't warm the planet. So examples of feedbacks include, number one, this concept of albedo. You may have been told, on a sunny, cold day in the winter, wear something black, wear something dark in the winter because the dark color sucks in the heat. It'll warm you up. Where if it's a sunny, hot day in the summer, wear something white. Same with planet Earth, where we have ice and snow and the sun hits it, the energy is reflected back towards space and does not contribute to warming. But the thing is, if we warm the Earth with CO2, we are reducing the amount of the surface that is white by melting snow and ice, replacing it with blue ocean, brown Earth, green Earth. And when we do that, that's a positive feedback. Another feedback is clouds. Clouds have both positive and negative elements. The top of the cloud is white, reflects radiation back towards space. Therefore, more clouds are a negative feedback. On the other hand, clouds close to the Earth trap heat that's trying to escape and contribute to warming. That's a positive feedback. Hope I said that right. The white tops of clouds, form a negative feedback. The bottom of the clouds that trap heat in cause a positive feedback. Another positive feedback is the release of methane. If we melt permafrost, where there's a lot of methane, CH4, or bottoms of oceans, where there's a lot of methane trapped, CH4 is a greenhouse gas like CO2. So causing more of that to be released will warm the planet, and it's positive feedback. Evaporation from the oceans, that puts more water vapor into the atmosphere. And it's true, water vapor is a greenhouse gas. H2O, the more humid it is, the harder it is to cool down. So the more H2O in the atmosphere, the warmer the Earth. So that would be an example of positive feedback. You can read all about these kinds of things in my global climate change fact sheet. This one, I believe we have the link to the 2015, but it's now been updated to 2020, climate change update 2020. Here I am doing my videos now, but we will be issuing a climate change 2025 update in a couple of years. Be aware of that. But you can Google Thomas Blaine Global Climate Change Fact Sheet, Ohio State, 2020. It'll come up. Here's my contact information, Patrick. I've had people contact me to request some of this, and a lot of people wanted to know, let's have one on vocabulary and on setting some of these topics straight. So that's why I wanted to do today's program. And, again, I just want to repeat, you can certainly contact me by email or phone and address topics that you would like with me or suggest programs in the future, because we're pretty flexible, right, Patrick?
I think so. One of the things that was mentioned to me is sometimes people have meetings, and I know that you can't be everywhere, but I'm assuming if someone wanted to have a Zoom meeting with you in which you were talking with the group, you'd be willing to do that. Is that correct?
I do a lot of them, but guess what? Next week, I'm a guest with Idaho Extension.
Very good.
Yeah. The folks in Idaho are having me on, it'll be February 22nd, 2023. I'm doing a Zoom with the folks in Idaho. I had to become a little bit of a specialist on Idaho's geography and climate. But I talked about part of that today because that's out there where that shallow sea was. If you remember that one map, Idaho was underneath that shallow sea and 100 million years ago. So I'm already somewhat familiar about the climate history of the Northwest, but I went ahead and got a lot of data for what's going on currently in Idaho. So the answer is yes. I've done a lot for counties in Ohio. If folks want me to do a Zoom session for their county or their group, a group inside a county, or like I say, outside Ohio, I'm doing Idaho next week. I've taught this material in South America. I've taught it in the former Soviet Union. Unfortunately, where there's a war going on now, I've done global warming presentations in Ukraine. Yes, Patrick, I'm available to folks to do these Zoom sessions. I mean, extension, that's what extension is about. We're about taking the university to the public. I'm an associate professor, but I really don't do classroom teaching. I do teaching to the public. And part of the philosophy of extension is the taxpayers of Ohio, for example, help support Ohio State University. And you may be a taxpayer and never attend a university. But we believe in extension that education is important for everyone, whether you sign up for classes at OSU or not. Education is still important. And so the purpose of extension is to reach out to the public with somebody like me, a faculty member who's, my specialty is environmental economics, but in terms of teaching, my specialty is to reach out to the public in programs like Earth is Our Home. And as you said, Zoom sessions, fact sheets and things like that.
Hey, we're talking with Dr. Thomas Blaine. He's an associate professor with the Ohio State University Extension Program. Tom, thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. We'll see you. Next program will be part 3 of the 2023 update. I'm looking forward to it.